Hi guys, I just wanted to kick off a little experiment I was planning on doing. Ever since I got into cigars, one thing I see on websites all the time is people asking whether or not to store their cigars in the cellophane. And uh, while all websites say it's a matter of personal preference and that moisture permeates through the cellophane, um, I saw one website where somebody asked if they should take their cigars out of their glass tubes, and the response was it was okay to leave them in the glass tubes because water would permeate through the glass. So I won't waste your time with all the reasons that that's so completely wrong. But one thing that's actually worth noting about cigars that are in tubes really is the end seal. So, for example, I have here a Romeo and Julieta, last one of a box that I bought years ago. And this has a plastic end cap, and there's a bit of sponge in between the cigar and the end cap to keep it from rattling around, I'm assuming. And this paper cap, which kind of finishes off the seal. And over here, I also have a Partagas. Now, this has got, again, a plastic end cap with a plastic shrink wrap on the end. And again, a little bit of foam sponge in between the cap. Now, here, just as a different one, the Macanudo Vintage 2000 is sealed with a piece of cork on the end and a shrink wrap plastic. So while you can make the argument that moisture can permeate through the cork, at the same time, objectively looking at this, cork is also the stuff they use to seal wine bottles, and wine bottles get stored on their end, and they get wet, and so the permeability is going to be slow. Well, not zero, it's going to be slow. But how do you measure that? And so I bought a couple of hygrometers off of eBay, identical, and the way it comes with this frame, it's too big to fit inside any of the wrappers that I have, and so I decided to take it out of the case. The challenge here is that it turns out that the way they cut manufacturing costs on this, and it can sell it so cheap, is that there's no real assembly involved. It's just a stack of parts. So there's an LCD display. Below that there's a PCB, and there's this interconnect strip, which is basically just rubber with metal leads periodically spaced out through here, so that you can place it anywhere and it'll match up the interconnects between the LCD and the PCB, and then the batteries just get pushed against some spring connects. So basically they just take all these components, drop them into the frame here, and snap it in. And once it snaps in, then everything's held together by compression. So pretty snappy design there to quickly assemble and cut manufacturing costs. But in order to make it fit, I had to take the frame off, and then everything kind of fell apart. So it's all being held together with rubber bands, no chewing gum in this case. But that was what I needed to do in order to keep these things from just falling apart. In addition, I need the compression to make sure I'm getting a good contact between the LCD display and the PCB. So, like I mentioned, the only thing that I had big enough is this 1968. I have a box of these 1968 Macanudos, and so I'm just going to take the cigar out of the wrapper. Actually, I have another one sitting over here. I'll just use this one. I got it unwrapped. And I'm going to just slide this inside. They've both been sitting out, and they're within a couple of percent. This one's reading, the control is reading 37%. This one's reading 39%. But I'll need to just kind of get the corners in here. More challenging than I anticipated. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this hygrometer that's in the cellophane, and I'm not going to do anything terribly extraordinary to seal it because the way the cigars come, the end is just folded over, and then it's held in place with this this barcode. So I'll just fold that over, tack it in place with the barcode the way it normally comes, and I'm just going to take these two, the original and the control, and set them inside the humidor. Now, the one that's in the plastic is already reading 10% higher, so there's some residual moisture inside this wrapper. And I think what's important to note is that I had initially started to do this recording once before. My video was locking up, and when I had just pulled the cigar out and put the hygrometer in, it immediately jumped 10%. So while I was trying to figure out what was going on with my video, I let the wrapper sit out, and I thought, well, I'll do it again with another cigar. And then as I was doing it, I said, well, let me use the one that's been sitting out because it should have stabilized. But interestingly enough, it's already reading about 7 points above the control. So I think that's pretty interesting. So in either case, these will go into the cabinet. I'll take a reading at least every morning. I may take a reading 3 times a day just to see how fast things start to change. And then once these stabilize at 70%, assuming that they do, I'll let them sit for several days at 70%, and then I'll take them back out to see how long it takes the one inside the wrapper to drop back down to ambient humidity. So we'll see how it goes, but it seemed to me that this is probably the most objective test, is to actually measure what's going on inside the wrapper rather than just assuming. Because the other thing is that while Macanudo is a major brand and I'm sure that they're using cellophane, it's not entirely clear to me that other companies may not be using plastic just because it's cheaper. So anyway, we'll see how it goes, and touch back. Okay, so I decided to let the cellophane sit open for a bit so that the humidity would stabilize in both. So right now the display right there is inside the humidor, so the humidor is at 70% and 71.5 degrees Fahrenheit, and the both hygrometers are right now, probably can't see that too well, but both are at 36%. So, so let's see here, load them in here. Okay, it's 1:13 p.m. So that's the one in the cellophane, obviously with the crinkles, and it's reading 37%, and the other one is reading 40 right now. So I'm going to check these around every 15 minutes for the first couple of hours and see how it starts off. So I've got a chart here with some data coming up, and the two sets of plots are the dark red line and the orange line are the hygrometers going in, and the two blue lines are the hygrometers coming out. Now, because when I was first setting this up, I saw that there was some residual humidity in the cellophane, I decided to just leave both of them out and have them settle out at ambient humidity, which worked out to be 37%. Now, when I first loaded them in the cabinet, I opened the door, and the door is full length, so I lose a lot of humidity, every time I open that door, which usually isn't a problem. And so you can see that the dark red line, which is the control, spiked up quite a bit, and right up to 60% immediately, and then kind of capped out at 65% after the first hour, and then or 45 minutes, and then just started creeping up after that. The orange line is the test, and it, interestingly enough, went up about 10 points or so when I first loaded it in, and another over the first 15 minutes, and then another 12 points or so over the next half hour, and then it slowed down and just slowly crept up, and they both ended up settling out at 69%. When I came down the next morning, they were at 69%. Now, the blue lines, which are the hygrometers coming out, again, the control responded immediately and dropped. But the humidity, ambient humidity, was a bit higher when I was taking them out because we've got a weather front coming in. It's supposed to be raining. And so the humidity generally was higher. So you can see that it dropped to about 43% or so, 42% over the first half hour, but it kind of milled around 40% for a long time. And the test inside the cellophane, it took a lot longer to drop down. So what's interesting is that the humidity took longer to get out of the cellophane than it did to get in. So that's interesting. I'll probably try this test again at some point just to see if it's because of the weather change and how the ambient temperature was, because at this point, with the humidity in the room being higher, the differential is less, and that may have been part of the reason. But at least it's clear that here's an objective measure of how the humidity will migrate through the cellophane. Anyway, thanks a lot.